They'll adopt Western technologies, but they won't accept basic biological facts. Just on a side note, this verse says, "Do not marry the wives of your sons." But Prophet Muhammad found a loophole. But as you know, when the Prophet wants something, he gets it. So he made his adopted son divorce his wife, and then Muhammad married his cousin Zainab. Oh, as for do not marry your son's wives, the Prophet said, meh, he's my adopted son, not a real son, you know. Alright folks, this is Harris Sultan. Throughout human history, most cultures were homogeneous unless they were conquered by an empire, in which case the culture of the empire became the dominant one. At least in the modern world, post-World War II, cultures were still predominantly homogeneous. As a result, if certain fundamental matters were considered morally reprehensible, there was seldom any dispute over them, and legislation on such matters was merely a formality. For example, if homosexuality was deemed morally wrong, most people were content to see it criminalized. As cultures evolved in their humanity, it was often not the governments that needed to be persuaded to decriminalize such acts, but the people themselves. This is how previously homogeneous cultures like Britain, America, and other Western countries moved away from racism, homophobia, and misogyny, encouraging their people to develop a higher moral conscience. Of course, I'm not suggesting that governments achieved this on their own. In fact, in most cases, they sought to maintain the status quo just to keep everyone happy. However, throughout history, remarkable individuals have challenged the status quo, driving progress. Such change would have been impossible without the West's embrace of democracy. By establishing simple yet profound values such as free speech, the West avoided the stagnation still seen in some other cultures today. Today, most Western countries are no longer homogeneous cultures. One of the downsides of this heightened moral conscience is the delusion of seeing good in everything. Not everything in the world is good. The world is a barbaric place with competing ideologies that not only conflict with Western values, but can only be described as primitive and barbaric. Nazism, communism, and Islamism are all ideologies that don't just challenge Western values, they are inherently oppressive for the people living under them. This is why almost everyone wants to move to the West, while no one wants to go to North Korea, Afghanistan, or Russia. Although Nazism is dead and communism no longer poses any immediate threat, Islamism, on the other hand, isn't just merely knocking on the door. It's ready to tear down the crumbling walls of the Western world and claim dominion. When other cultures find their way into the West, they don't just bring positive contributions like delicious cuisines, colorful attire, and exciting new festivities. They also bring primitive moral codes that should be seen as morally reprehensible.
A sunnah for the boys and the honorable thing to do if needed for the girls. And this is something that a Muslim gynecologist can tell you if you need to or not. There used to be a lady that used to do this for women, or I mean young girls. And she is expected to only cut the tip of the sexually sensitive part in the girl, so that she is not hyper-sexually active.
Forcing women to wear what can only be described as bin bags.
بتاكله وباكل عادي اهو عادي خالص باكل بايدي اليمين حتى لو في شوكة وسكينة برضه باكل.
Honor killings.
Hello. Tiva, who'd been living in Turkey for the last 5 years, also used social media to talk about threats against her and her family. It seems her father back in Iraq disapproved of her lifestyle, and when she returned in January, he killed her.
Homophobia.
Life for gays in the Muslim world is difficult as it is, but in the areas where ISIS rules, the retribution is beyond cruel. Now, again, ISIS images meant to shock and to terrorize have been distributed, and more examples of their inhumanity are on display.
These stills, dated March 2015, purport to show a man being thrown from a building. According to the last caption, he was also then stoned to death.
The execution of apostates and dissidents. And today's topic, cousin marriages. These external problems did not exist when the West was culturally homogenous. Now, I'm not suggesting that Western societies didn't have their own fair share of problems, but once they overcame most of those issues, they ended up importing foreign problems.
I believe the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, married Aisha at 6 and he consummated marriage at 9. I have zero problem with that at all.
This happened because their heightened moral conscience led them to see butterflies and rainbows in every culture. So how do you counter that? How do you tell these huge numbers of imported people who have customs and values that we in the West consider immoral? Well, one such attempt was made on 10th of December when the UK's MP for Basildon and Bellerique, Richard Holden, introduced in Parliament his proposal to ban first cousin marriages.
The science, Mr. Speaker, is clear. First cousin marriages should be banned on the basis of health risk alone.
You're either disgusted to learn that some cultures still copulate with their cousins.
Brother, what's that? What's that, brother?
Or you're upset because you're one of those people who has the hots for their cousins.
I'm going through the toughest period of my adolescence now, which is naturally called unrequited love. How is it any different from any of yours? Well, I'm in love with my cousin.
In his 8.5-minute speech, Holden first recounts the history of cousin marriage in England, explaining that as early as the 5th century, the church's doctrine against cousin marriage was based on a verse in Leviticus. He explained that this ruling stood until 1540 when King Henry VIII broke with Rome and legalized first cousin marriage so that he could marry Catherine Howard. In centuries past, it is well known that royalty practiced consanguineous marriages as a way to keep bloodlines pure and to keep both power and fortunes within the family. The practice did not stop with monarchies, as according to an 1810 writing of Pierre Samuel Dupont, the marriages that I should prefer for our colony would be between the cousins. In that way, we should be sure of honesty of soul and purity of blood. Anyway, this practice came under debate in North America and Western Europe in the 1850s when medical and scientific communities became concerned with the biological effects. Charles Darwin, who married a cousin himself, began rethinking the concept when he noted in his book The Variation of Animals and Plants Under Domestication that the crossing of animals and plants that are not closely related to each other is highly beneficial or even necessary, and that interbreeding prolonged during many generations is highly injurious. So, in a way, you could say that the West is nearly 200 years ahead of the Muslim world. No wonder they're still debating archaic medieval practices like honor killings, adultery, and whether music should be allowed, or even whether it is acceptable to marry your cousins. They'll adopt Western technologies, but they won't accept basic biological facts. These new technologies, like the internet, have made Muslims more radical because now anyone can look up the golden sayings of Prophet Muhammad, like this one. If he asks her for intimacy, even if she's on her camel's saddle, she should not refuse. So, thanks to social media, more Muslim men than ever before can read hadiths like this, and consequently, instead of raising their moral conscience according to the standards of the 21st century, they will listen to their medieval prophet. This is why I believe Islam will either remain stuck in the Dark Ages or simply vanish. There is no middle ground with Islam. Most Muslims will either become more radical thanks to better access to Muhammad's teachings, like the Taliban.
Of Birmingham will not tolerate the disrespect of our Prophet, peace be upon him, and there will be outcomes from your actions. You will have repercussions for your actions. We have been trained from birth that we must defend the honor of our Prophet, and we will lay our life on the line.
Or eventually become ex-Muslims like me. A Christian-style reformation is highly unlikely. It was in 1870 that Darwin's associate anthropologist John Lubbock first brought the debate to the House of Commons. He was rejected, although the inquiry brought more scholarly interest to the matter. In current times, the dangers of cousin marriages are well defined and well documented. The problem lies in regressive mutations becoming more dominant in a restricted gene pool, causing genetic disorders. Comprehensive studies show that consanguineous marriages produce in their offspring blood and platelet disorders, renal diseases, birth defects, and higher mortality rates. The prevalence of cousin marriage is the highest in Arab countries, with Pakistan being the highest, followed by Kuwait, Qatar, the UAE, and Sudan rounding out the top 5. Quran's verses 4:22 to 24 provide a list of marriage prohibitions, with cousins and grandmothers being noticeably absent. Also forbidden to you for marriage are your mothers, your daughters, your sisters, your paternal and maternal aunts, your brother's daughters, your sister's daughters, your foster mothers, your foster sisters, your mothers-in-law, your stepdaughters under your guardianship if you have consummated marriage with their mothers, but if you have not, then it's okay, you can marry your stepdaughters as well, nor the wives of your own sons. Remember this point, nor two sisters together at the same time, except what was done previously. Surely Allah is all forgiving, most merciful. Just on a side note, this verse says, do not marry the wives of your sons. But Prophet Muhammad found a loophole. The Prophet Muhammad married his first cousin Zainab bint Jahsh, who was previously married to Muhammad's adopted son Zayd. But as you know, when the Prophet wants something, he gets it. So he made his adopted son divorce his wife, and then Muhammad married his cousin Zainab. Oh, as for do not marry your son's wives, the Prophet said, meh, he's my adopted son, not a real son, you know. While the practice of cousin marriage among British Muslims is falling, it is still between 40 to 46% today. MP Holden specifically mentions the British Pakistani community in his speech. He raises concerns about the health risks, including an Oxford University study that named disorders such as Tay-Sachs, cerebral palsy, and cystic fibrosis. He also mentions the matter of women's freedom, highlighting his work in the past where he campaigned for and succeeded in banning virginity tests in November 2021. Mr. Holden even won an award for women's rights organization, IKWRO, ICRO, in 2022 for his fight against honor-based abuse in the UK. But, as I said, what is deemed morally and scientifically wrong is not always seen as such in other cultures. As expected, Muslims fought back. Contesting the proposal was MP Iqbal Muhammad. Muhammad was elected MP for Dewsbury and Batley in July 2024. According to a study conducted in Bradford, the number of babies born with birth defects in Bradford is nearly double the national average. Consanguineous marriage accounted for nearly a third of abnormalities in a study of more than 11,300 babies. Instead of supporting this bill, MP Iqbal argued that people marry their cousins to strengthen family bonds.
The reason the practice is so common is that ordinary people see family intermarriage overall as something that is very positive, something that helps build family bonds and helps put families on a more secure financial foothold.
Yeah, just like the Prophet Muhammad, who made his adopted son divorce his wife so Prophet Muhammad could strengthen family bonds by sleeping with his cousin. Well, seems like a case of opportunism to me, just like King Henry VIII, who destroyed all traditions so he could marry the woman he wanted. Prophet Muhammad did the same, and in the process, he destroyed the whole institute of adoption. The pro-Palestine MP countered that he did not believe it would be effective or enforceable to empower the state to stop people from shagging their cousins. Of course, the issue is that the UK is not an Arab country and should not be expected to behave as such. The UK has its own cultural values and it should stick by them. How many times we have to say this? If you don't like it, you can go. Go somewhere where you can shag your cousins. So, what do you think? Should Britain keep allowing Muslims to marry their cousins and contribute towards the already burdened NHS? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you liked today's video. Like, share and subscribe to the channel. Or you can support the channel by buying t-shirts on harrysalt.com. Like this t-shirt, Ban Cousin Marriage. Or become a patron on patreon.com/HarrisSultan. Alternatively, you can just buy me a coffee on buymeacoffee.com/HarrisSultan. Until next time, ta-ra. If you'd like to support my work, you can become my patron by going to patreon.com/HarrisSultan, or you can simply buy me a coffee.